Originally the Queen's fern brooch, Kate has sported this pin a number of times. The monarch had received the brooch on Queen Elizabeth II's world tour in 1953 by a New Zealand woman.
King Charles just signed a devastating sovereign directive that completely strips Queen Camilla of her most prized possessions. In an unprecedented move, the king has ordered Camilla's entire diamond brooch collection to be immediately handed over to Catherine, Princess of Wales. This isn't a simple loan, it is a permanent transfer of the monarchy's most powerful visual symbols. Behind palace doors, Camilla is calling it a public humiliation, but Charles is looking directly at the future of the bloodline. The battle for the crown jewels has just erupted, and the future queen has already won. A heavy vault door opens at Buckingham Palace. A heavy mechanized click echoed through the reinforced concrete basement of Buckingham Palace as the electronic combination lock cleared the final security sequence. It was early July 26. A senior vault custodian, flanked by 2 armed officers from the Metropolitan Police Protection Command, pulled back the solid steel door of the Royal Jewel Storage Facility. Inside the climate-controlled room, hundreds of blue and red leather presentation boxes sat on velvet-lined shelves containing the private material history of the House of Windsor. The custodian walked past the historic tiaras and parures, stopping before a specific cabinet labeled with the cipher of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. He pulled out a large, worn Morocco leather case and placed a signed sovereign directive on the empty shelf. The facts of that morning were outlined in an official administrative order delivered directly to the keeper of the Privy Purse at 8:30. The document bore King Charles III's personal signature at the foot of the page, bypassing the standard joint consultation committee that usually managed the movement of historic heirloom items between royal households. The directive was brief, explicit, and legally binding. It commanded the immediate physical collection, cataloging, and transfer of the historic diamond flower brooch collection from Queen Camilla's custody to the private apartments of Catherine, Princess of Wales, at Kensington Palace. It was a total permanent transfer of visual authority. The tension within the palace administration reached a boiling point before the lunchtime staff shift change. For over 2 decades, the diamond flower brooch collection, a set of 3 magnificent mid-19th century floral sprays encrusted with hundreds of old-cut, brilliant diamonds, had been a personal favorite of Camilla. She had worn the pieces to high-profile state banquets, opening ceremonies of parliament, and international tours, using them to project her status as the senior matriarch of the family. But as the custodian logged the transfer in the Central Palace inventory ledger, it became clear that a major constitutional line had been drawn. The king was systematically stripping his wife of her most powerful visual symbols of rank. Charles did not issue the order during a formal family meeting. He chose to sign the directive in his private study at Clarence House while Camilla was away on a brief private weekend visit to her family in Wiltshire. The move was calculated to prevent an immediate domestic confrontation, but it sent a powerful shockwave through the court. Senior ladies-in-waiting and private secretaries who had served the Queen for years realized that the king was actively reasserting the primacy of the bloodline over his marriage. He was looking directly at the long-term survival of the crown, and he knew that those diamonds belonged to the future queen consort, not the current one. The mystery that deeply troubled Camilla's inner circle was the sudden legal justification Charles invoked to carry out this forced transfer without her consent. The answer lay buried deep within a highly confidential legal file containing a specific secret clause in Queen Mary's 1953 will. Queen Mary, the grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II, was a fierce protector of the monarchy's visual legacy. She had explicitly decreed that certain high-value diamond collections, while available for use by reigning queens and queen consorts, remain the permanent property of the sovereign lineage. The clause legally prevented any non-blood spouse from permanently retaining, hiding, or passing down crown heirloom jewelry outside the direct line of succession. William's legal team at the Duchy of Cornwall had spent the spring of 26 auditing the palace inventory records to ensure compliance with Queen Mary's historic mandates. They discovered that several prominent pieces, including the diamond flower brooches, had not been formally logged back into the Central Palace vaults after recent public appearances. Instead, they had been held in Camilla's private dressing room safe. William viewed this prolonged retention as a subtle attempt by his stepmother to permanently absorb the pieces into her own personal collection. He brought the audit findings directly to his father, demanding that the law of the lineage be enforced immediately to protect Catherine's future status. The physical execution of the sovereign directive began at 10 o'clock that morning. A royal security escort took custody of the leather presentation boxes at Buckingham Palace and transported them under high security across London to Kensington Palace. When Princess Catherine's personal dresser received the items at apartment 1A, she immediately placed them into a specialized display case in the princess's private sitting room. The return of the brooches to the direct bloodline was completed in less than 90 minutes, without a single word being leaked to the waiting press outside the palace gates. The strategic timing of this jewelry transfer was directly tied to Catherine's gradual, highly anticipated return to full public visibility in late 26. The palace was planning a series of major state events for the autumn season, and Charles wanted to ensure that the Princess of Wales possessed the ultimate visual symbols of royal authority when she stepped back onto the world stage. By granting her exclusive access to the Queen Mother's favorite diamonds, the king was sending an unmistakable message to the global public. He was declaring Catherine the true, legitimate keeper of the monarchy's visual legacy, regardless of who currently held the title of Queen Consort. Camilla's reaction when she returned to London and discovered the empty safe in her dressing room was described by household staff as completely explosive. She viewed the secret removal of the brooches as a profound public humiliation and a direct challenge to her position within the family. She immediately demanded an explanation from the king's private secretary, only to be handed a photocopy of Queen Mary's 1953 will and the signed sovereign directive. The legal net had closed around her, and she had no avenue of appeal. The diamonds were gone, and the internal balance of power had shifted permanently toward Kensington Palace. The clash over the diamond brooch collection exposed a deep, permanent fracture at the very top of the British monarchy. It proved that even a reigning queen consort could be instantly sidelined when her interests conflicted with the long-term preservation of the bloodline. William and Catherine had successfully used the ancient laws of the crown to outmaneuver Camilla, establishing a precedent that would dictate the ownership of every major piece of jewelry in the royal vaults for generations to come. The battle for the sovereign sparkles had been won, leaving a cold, bitter silence echoing through the corridors of Clarence House. The battle for the sovereign sparkles. The quiet whir of a specialized digital scale filled the high-security workspace of the Royal Goldsmith in London. It was mid-July 26. A senior gemologist, wearing black microfiber gloves, used rubber-tipped tweezers to lift the central blossom of the diamond flower brooch collection. He placed it carefully on the metal plate. The digital readout showed exactly 12.4 carats for the primary stone alone. This was not a routine insurance appraisal. The goldsmith was executing an emergency forensic inventory audit ordered by the Privy Purse. Every single diamond, platinum setting, and gold pin had to be verified against the historical registry of 1953. The facts surrounding these specific pieces explained why they were treated like state property rather than simple fashion accessories. The 3 diamond floral sprays were commissioned in the late 19th century by Queen Victoria for her granddaughter. They were designed using a revolutionary trembling setting, allowing the diamond petals to move slightly with the wearer's breath, catching the maximum amount of light in candlelit ballrooms. They passed directly to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who used them throughout the 1930s-40s as a visual statement of resilience during the war years. They were symbols of survival, continuity, and undisputed royal legitimacy. The tension over the collection started when the inventory clerks noticed a significant gap in the physical location logs. According to palace rules updated in 24, any historic piece valued at over £100,000 had to be returned to the central vaults at Buckingham Palace within 48 hours of a public appearance. Camilla had worn the flower brooches to a diplomatic reception at the French embassy in May 26, but the return signature column in the ledger remained completely blank for weeks. The diamonds had vanished from the official tracking system, triggering an internal security flag. The investigation into the missing items revealed a highly unusual domestic situation. The private inventory records from late May 26 showed that the collection had been packed into an unmarked leather transit case and loaded into a private vehicle. The vehicle did not drive to the central London vaults. Instead, it traveled 90 miles west to Ray Mill House. Camilla's private country home in Wiltshire. The move was executed by a personal driver, without the authorization of the master of the household. Camilla had physically moved state heirlooms to her non-royal property, effectively taking them off the grid. The mystery that the king's legal advisors had to untangle was why the queen consort would risk such a blatant breach of protocol. The answer was found in a series of private correspondence files kept by the queen's personal jewelry curator. Camilla was keenly aware of Princess Catherine's growing public popularity. She noticed that when foreign heads of state visited London, the international press focused entirely on Catherine's style, jewelry choices, and regal bearing. Camilla felt her own visual authority slipping away. By securing the Queen Mother's favorite brooches at her private estate, she was trying to create a permanent monopoly on the most recognizable diamonds in the collection, ensuring she could not be visually overshadowed at upcoming state functions. The discovery of the Wiltshire cache caused immediate panic among senior courtiers at Buckingham Palace. They knew that, if an independent audit of the crown assets found that state-adjacent jewelry was being held at a private, uninsured civilian property, it would create a massive financial and constitutional scandal. The press would accuse the queen consort of treating national treasures as personal souvenirs. The keeper of the privy purse immediately brought the tracking logs to King Charles, presenting him with the hard evidence of his wife's unauthorized removal of the pieces. Charles faced a difficult tactical choice. He could not ignore the breach without alienating his own auditing team and his heir, Prince William, who was actively monitoring the crown assets. The king ordered his personal secretary to draft a formal demand for the immediate return of the Moroccan leather case. He didn't send a polite request. He issued an official command backed by the sovereign's authority. He made it clear to Camilla that the collection had to be returned to London by courier within 12 hours, or he would authorize a formal security recovery by the palace protection team. The diamonds arrived back at Buckingham Palace the following morning, but the battle was far from over. The physical return of the brooches did not satisfy Prince William. He argued that as long as the pieces remained under Camilla's nominal control at Clarence House, the risk of another unauthorized relocation remained high. He demanded that the collection be legally and physically transferred to Kensington Palace, where it would be held under the direct custody of Princess Catherine's staff. William wanted a permanent solution that would remove the diamonds from Camilla's reach forever. The factual dynamic of the royal jewelry collection had always been used to signal favor and future power. When Queen Elizabeth II was alive, she carefully selected which tiaras and brooches she loaned to her daughters-in-law and granddaughters, using the glitter of the vault to reward loyalty or signal a change in status. King Charles was now using that same ancient mechanism. By ordering the permanent handover of the flower brooches to Catherine, he was publicly signaling that the future of the monarchy lay with the Princess of Wales. He was stripping the current queen of her visual armor to fortify the future queen consort. The final verification of the diamonds was completed by the royal goldsmith by mid-afternoon. Every stone was intact, and the trembling settings were functioning perfectly. The gold-trimmed boxes were sealed and prepared for the final transit to Kensington Palace. The battle over the sovereign sparkle had reached its legal conclusion, but the emotional damage within the private apartments of Clarence House was permanent. Camilla had lost her favorite symbols of majesty, and the court had received a clear demonstration of who truly held the keys to the kingdom's visual legacy. The changing of the guard at Kensington Palace. A heavy walnut wardrobe door opened inside the private dressing suite at apartment 1A, Kensington Palace. It was late July 26. Princess Catherine's personal stylist carefully pulled back a sheet of white acid-free tissue paper, revealing a tailored royal blue velvet gown designed for an upcoming autumn state reception. On a marble-top table next to the wardrobe sat the 3 empty velvet grooves of the newly arrived Morocco leather case. Catherine walked into the room, picked up the largest diamond flower spray, and pinned it to the left lapel of the gown. The brilliant old cut stones caught the afternoon sun, instantly transforming the elegant dress into a historic statement of royal sovereignty. The facts surrounding Catherine's gradual return to the public eye in late 26 were being managed with military precision by her corporate communications team. Following months of careful health management, her scheduling diary was deliberately packed with high-stakes international appearances, including a critical state dinner for a visiting North American delegation. The palace needed to project an image of absolute institutional strength, continuity, and generational renewal. Catherine's physical appearance at these events was the primary weapon in the crown's public relations arsenal. Every detail of her wardrobe, her posture, and her jewelry was designed to send a clear message to the global public. The future of the British monarchy was completely secure in her hands. The tension generated by this strategic elevation was felt acutely in the corridors of Clarence House. Queen Camilla watched the media planning documents with growing frustration as her own autumn schedule was systematically relegated to lower-profile domestic charities. Her personal staff noted that the upcoming state reception layout would place Catherine directly alongside King Charles in the main receiving line, while Camilla would be positioned further down the row, next to the diplomatic corps. The transfer of the diamond flower brooch collection was the ultimate physical confirmation of this changing of the guard. The crown's most iconic diamonds were no longer being used to enhance the status of the current queen consort. They were being deployed to anchor the legitimacy of her successor. The mystery that intrigued senior royal correspondents was why King Charles chose this exact moment in 26 to accelerate the visual transition of power. The answer was found in a highly confidential briefing document prepared by the king's private medical and legacy advisors at Sandringham. The document, which Charles shared exclusively with Prince William during a private walk on the estate, outlined a definitive timeline for the gradual devolution of sovereign responsibilities. The king's advisors recognized that while Charles remained fully committed to his constitutional duties, the long-term public face of the empire needed to shift decisively to the younger generation to maintain the institution's relevance and popularity. The jewelry transfer was the first concrete step in a broader, pre-planned handover of symbolic authority. William used the findings of this legacy briefing to reinforce his position during a meeting with the Lord Chamberlain. He insisted that Catherine's jewelry choices for the remainder of 26 should reflect her status as the designated future matriarch of the crown. He argued that it was counterproductive for the current queen consort to continue wearing the most significant pieces from the late Queen Mother's collection when those pieces could be used to maximize Catherine's international impact. The Lord Chamberlain agreed with the logic, officially updating the royal dress protocol to grant Kensington Palace primary booking rights over the historical heirloom vaults for all state occasions. The physical presence of the diamond brooches at Kensington Palace completely altered the dynamic of the upcoming autumn campaign. Catherine's design team spent days adjusting the necklines of her scheduled outfits to ensure the historic pieces were displayed prominently for the television cameras. The gemologists at the Royal Goldsmiths Workshop were summoned to Kensington Palace to fit the brooches with a specialized modern security clasp to prevent any accidental damage during public walkabouts. The level of care and attention dedicated to the items proved that they were no longer viewed as mere personal accessories. They were being treated as active instruments of state policy. Camilla's inner circle viewed this meticulous preparation as an intentional effort to erase her 20-year contribution to the family's public image. She had spent decades rebuilding her reputation following the turbulent events of the 1990s, eventually earning the public's respect through hard work and absolute loyalty to Charles. To see her favorite diamonds stripped away and handed to a younger rival just as she reached the pinnacle of her rank was a bitter pill to swallow. She felt that the palace administration was treating her current tenure as a temporary placeholder, counting down the days until Catherine officially took her place on the throne. The public soon caught its first glimpse of the changing of the guard during a high-profile charity gala in London. Although the full state reception was still weeks away, Catherine chose to wear the smallest of the 3 diamond flower sprays to an intimate dinner for her early childhood foundation. The media reaction was instantaneous and overwhelmingly positive. Fashion editors and royal historians analyzed the appearance within minutes of the photographs being released, noting the deep historical connection to the Queen Mother and praising Catherine's classic regal presentation. The diamonds had done exactly what the king's legacy advisors intended. They had reinforced her natural authority and solidified her position as the undisputed star of the modern monarchy. William watched the media coverage from his office at Adelaide Cottage with a deep sense of satisfaction. He had successfully protected his mother's memory, enforced the lineage's traditional laws, and secured a vital visual advantage for his wife. the battle for the sovereign sparkles had moved beyond a simple domestic dispute over jewelry. It had become the defining symbol of how the House of Windsor intended to navigate the transition into the mid-26 era. The guard had changed at Kensington Palace, and the brilliant glitter of the Queen Mother's diamonds now illuminated the path toward a new royal reign: tears and tiaras. Behind closed palace doors, a hand-painted porcelain teacup shattered against the base of an 18th century sideboard inside the private apartments at Windsor Castle. It was late July 26. The sharp crack of breaking ceramic echoed through the long gallery, causing two liveried footmen standing outside the heavy oak doors to instantly stiffen. Inside the room, Queen Camilla stood by a tall sash window overlooking the quadrangle, her face flushed with anger. King Charles sat in a green damask armchair near the writing desk, his hands resting flat on his knees, his expression completely exhausted. The private space, usually a sanctuary from the intense pressures of state business, had transformed into a bitter domestic battleground over a leather box of diamonds. The facts of that explosive confrontation were recorded in the private logs of the Windsor Castle Security Detachment. The argument had broken out less than an hour after the Queen's personal dresser formally confirmed that the diamond flower brooch collection was no longer stored in the Buckingham Palace wardrobes. Camilla had discovered the truth through an internal inventory slip that had been mistakenly routed to her office by a junior clerk in the Privy Purse Department. The slip clearly showed that the pieces had been permanently assigned to the Kensington Palace inventory under the sovereign's direct authority. She had immediately demanded that the king meet her at Windsor to address what she viewed as an unprovoked assault on her status. The tension in the room was driven by decades of accumulated personal and institutional grievances. Camilla looked at the king and openly accused him of cowardice. She argued that she had spent 20 years enduring intense public scrutiny, press hostility, and internal family coldness to support his path to the throne. She had accepted a compromised title, worked a grueling schedule of low-profile charity engagements, and maintained absolute loyalty to the crown through its darkest scandals. To have her most prized pieces of ceremonial armor secretly stripped away and handed to her younger daughter-in-law without a single face-to-face conversation was, in her view, a public act of humiliation that signaled a total lack of respect for her position as queen consort. Charles did not shout back. He spoke in a low, measured voice that had been coached by his senior constitutional advisors over the preceding 48 hours. He explained to his wife that the decision was not personal, but institutional. He stated that the Prince of Wales's legal team had presented undeniable proof that the long-term retention of those specific heirlooms at Clarence House violated the strict lineage parameters established by Queen Mary in 1953. The king reminded her that the monarchy was currently facing an intense public battle for relevance, and that every visual asset had to be deployed where it would have the maximum strategic impact. Catherine was the future of the bloodline, and she required the traditional symbols of majesty to anchor her public return. The mystery that senior domestic staff tried to piece together from the raised voices inside the apartment was whether Prince William had intervened directly to force his father's hand during the dispute. The answer was found in a series of encrypted text exchanges between the king's private secretary and the Duchy of Cornwall's chief legal counsel. William had not just spotted Camilla wearing the brooches at the French embassy banquet in May. He had actively used his financial leverage over the king's personal estate renovation budget to ensure the sovereign directive was signed. William had made it clear to his father that if the current queen continued to absorb crown heirlooms into her private collection, Kensington Palace would withdraw its cooperation from several upcoming high-profile family events, effectively forcing Charles to choose between his wife's vanity and his heir's total support. Camilla refused to accept the king's constitutional justifications. She pointed out that Princess Catherine already possessed an immense, unparalleled collection of jewelry that had belonged directly to Princess Diana, including the iconic sapphire engagement ring and the lover's knot tiara. She argued that the younger generation was already visually dominant across global media outlets, and that stripping the reigning queen consort of her signature pieces only made the current reign look weak, temporary, and entirely subordinate to the future. She told Charles that by bowing to William's aggressive legal demands, he was effectively allowing his son to run the palace before he had even inherited the crown. The argument continued for over 2 hours, shifting from the specific ownership of the diamond brooches to the broader, lingering tensions regarding the future role of the Parker Bowles family within the state. Camilla felt that her children, Tom and Laura, were being systematically erased from the social fabric of the court to satisfy William's obsession with a pure bloodline. She viewed the jewelry transfer as the first step in a larger coordinated campaign by Kensington Palace to completely isolate her family the moment Charles's reign reached its natural conclusion. She demanded that the king issue a counter-decree guaranteeing her lifetime access to the secondary jewelry vaults at Lancaster House, but Charles firmly refused to sign any further protocol alterations. The king's refusal broke the final string of Camilla's patience. She walked out of the private sitting room, slamming the interconnecting door behind her, and ordered her personal driver to prepare her car for an immediate return to Ray Mill House in Wiltshire. She chose to leave the royal castle entirely, retreating to her private civilian property to avoid standing next to the king during an upcoming weekend church service at Windsor. The physical separation was a clear indication to the household staff that the internal rift over the diamonds had created a profound, unprecedented crisis at the very center of the marriage. The Lord Chamberlain was notified of the Queen's sudden departure by encrypted radio at 4:30. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the King's private secretary to manage the potential public relations fallout. They knew that if the international press noticed the Queen's absence from scheduled family events, the speculation about a marital breakdown would completely overshadow the positive coverage of Catherine's public return. They began drafting a series of cover stories, attributing Camilla's sudden trip to Wiltshire to a minor bout of seasonal exhaustion. But the tension inside the palace administrative offices remained incredibly high. William received the news of the confrontation while working at his desk at Adelaide Cottage. He did not express regret or concern over the domestic storm he had caused. He viewed the Queen's explosive reaction as total confirmation that his audit had been necessary to protect the Crown's assets. He had successfully demonstrated to the entire court that the laws of the lineage were completely non-negotiable and that no step family member could ever manipulate the sovereign vaults for personal status. The diamond brooches were safe at Kensington Palace. The red lines had been defended with absolute authority, and the future king had proved that he was fully prepared to police the boundaries of his kingdom behind closed palace doors. The final Crown Jewels Decree of 26. The rain cleared over the Thames Valley on the morning of July 30th, 26. Outside the stone walls of Kensington Palace, 2 security officers in civilian clothes carried 3 identical black leather presentation cases toward the secure garage. The cases, stamped with the golden cipher of Princess Catherine, were loaded into the back of an armored convoy. Inside those boxes sat the verified catalog collection of diamond flower brooches. This physical transfer marked the absolute conclusion of the legal dispute. The diamonds were now officially integrated into the permanent registry of Kensington Palace, locked inside the high-security safes of Apartment 1A. The facts of the final sovereign decree were officially recorded in the London Gazette later that afternoon. King Charles had issued a formal clarification to the Royal Collection Trust. The decree explicitly stated that all high-carat heirloom jewelry originally belonging to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, would henceforth be managed under a strict direct descent protocol. This meant that the pieces could only be held, worn, or curated by individuals in the direct line of succession, or by those married to the immediate heir. The loophole that had allowed Queen Camilla to hold the items at her private estate was permanently closed by law. The tension within the palace administration slowly began to cool as the new protocol took effect. Queen Camilla remained at her private country home in Wiltshire for several more days, refusing to participate in joint telephone briefings with the Lord Chamberlain's office. But the institutional machinery of the monarchy did not wait for her return. The planners for the upcoming autumn state reception finalized the official guest itineraries using the updated jewelry logs. Princess Catherine was formally designated as the sole user of the historic floral sprays for all upcoming international diplomatic events in 26. The mystery that many high-ranking courtiers were left with was how this definitive ruling would impact Camilla's public appearances for the remainder of the king's reign. The answer came in the form of a revised dress memorandum issued by the master of the household. Camilla would still have access to the secondary jewelry vaults, including pieces left to the crown by Queen Elizabeth II. However, she would no longer be permitted to wear items that carry deep, multi-generational symbolic weight for the direct lineage. The king had effectively restricted her visual choices, ensuring her public presentation reflected her position as a supportive spouse rather than a permanent matriarch of the dynasty. William watched the implementation of the new decree with absolute satisfaction. He had successfully used the ancient laws of the crown to secure a major constitutional victory for his family. He had proved to the entire court that the integrity of the bloodline was entirely non-negotiable, and that the visual legacy of the monarchy would be preserved exactly as history intended. The diamond brooches were now firmly in the hands of the future queen consort, drawing a clear, brilliant line between the current reign and the future of the British kingdom. King Charles has spoken, and the battle for the crown jewels is officially over. By ordering the permanent handover of these historic diamonds to Princess Catherine, the king has drawn an undeniable line between the current reign and the future of the bloodline. Do you think Charles made the right decision by enforcing this strict lineage decree against Queen Camilla? Or was it an unnecessary public humiliation for a queen who has served the crown faithfully for 2 decades? Tell me your thoughts in the comments section below. If you want more exclusive breakdowns and deep dives into the hidden power struggles of the British royal family, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.